So I'm today just going to talk mainly about what NRCS does on brush management, planning, technical end, and financial. But, you can go ahead. But I want you to kind of understand that a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about is also available as technical help to anyone. So the references that I'm going to show you and most of the stuff that we talk about, our technical guide, it's called our Field Office Technical Guide, is available online, and the references are available to anyone so that you don't have to just be planning a project with NRCS. You can use some of our references through the years that we've come up with. And some of our references are actually even from other states that we use. So that's kind of the take home of this. And we didn't print it in your packet because they change. So, you know, some of the guides will be updated, and they're always updated on our website when they change. So I think there was going to be a link to that somewhere, but just know that you can always just Google NRCS and look up our tech guide and find a lot of this reference material. And then we're just going to talk about our techniques and then the actual requirements if you're using NRCS funding. And then I'll talk a little bit about payments and eligibility right now. So basically, we want to start with planning. If somebody calls us and says, I want to treat brush in this pasture, we really want to go and look at the whole ranch, as we were talking about just a little bit ago, trying to manage brush management and not look at the entire ranch isn't that helpful, because you want to see where you're going to be able to rest areas, move the cattle, what the best area to treat is. So we like to come up with a full plan so that we can, you know, help the ag production. It's basically our motto is helping people help the land. So if we can't keep an ag producer out there, then we're not doing any good. If we're doing a project and it's costing them a bunch of money and we didn't look at the whole ranch, then we may, you know, put them out of business, and we don't want to do that. And then we also, of course, have to comply with environmental regulations because we're a federal agency. And most of your state agencies and federal are going to have to do that if you're using any funding or technical help. So we have to look at the Clean Water Act, air, endangered species, and state and tribal laws. Air, the thing you want to remember, especially if we're doing prescribed fire, there are air quality requirements in that, and even sometimes on mechanical, if you're kicking up a lot of dust. So we have to look at things you wouldn't think we do, but we do. So these are a lot of the technical references that I was talking about. We have a great plants database that you can just Google Department of USDA plants, so that if you're not sure what's out there, you can just look it up. There's usually photos and locations. We rely on our soil survey, and there's a web soil survey that you can get for any location pretty much across the country where a survey's been done. We have our water supply forecast so that we can kind of look at what the historic rain has been and what the prediction is for the future. We'll look at an ecological site part of that today. Like I said, the tech guide is where most of this is, and then we coordinate with agencies if we're looking at, especially, we work on private, state, and some federal land and tribal land, so we have to coordinate with those agencies. And then we have a planning procedures handbook that talks about a lot with our monitoring as well, which I'll touch on. So what we do and pay for is mechanical, chemical. We have biological. I've never done any in this area, and I don't even know if we've ever done any in Arizona. And then prescribed fire, which we've been able to work on one technically within the valley. We didn't do financial because we coordinated that with the Buenos Aires and they paid for it. But we did the technical help on it. But we do have a payment schedule that we could pay on prescribed fire. So each of these requires different planning, and I'll touch a little bit on each of those planning measurements. So on mechanical, as you know, there's a lot of different kinds of mechanical. In this valley, we've never done any mechanical brush treatment, I don't think, in my 30 years. Dan, back when you were a range con, did you do much?
Yeah, there was a lot done.
Yeah, so it's been a long time though.
It's been a long time, but Charlie and Mary have done stuff with
Yeah.
their tenure there.
Yeah. So, we haven't done much lately, but that's what we're looking at, is mechanical and chemical, more trying to move to that, because fire may not be feasible with all the planning and whether or not you can actually, have a fire when you planted it. Plan for years and never actually be able to do it due to climate or other financial reasons. So a lot of our photos here that we have are over from the Santa Cruz area. We've done quite a bit over on some ranches over there. Go ahead and move on. You know, basically going in and grubbing, pushing mesquite. We've done some root plowing. Up north, they do a lot of pinyon juniper. We do a lot of mechanical up there. Again, that's the grubbing over there, Santa Cruz County. Then chemical, again, we haven't done much chemical in this area, but that's what we're really looking at. We've done quite a bit of spike treatments on wait a bit and sandpaper bush. We have a couple more planned over that way. And generally, in those cases, we may have funded 1 or 2 or 3 contracts on different landowners, and then they'll coordinate with the applicators to get them over there at once and make it cheaper. So that's where we'll find a contract, kind of work with you, but you would need to coordinate with your applicator and see if you could get a bunch of people together. Is a lot cheaper chemical, and a lot of times they won't come out unless there's larger areas to treat. But we've done some of that. And most of that is GPS'd, and it's GPS'd on the plane, so it's pretty accurate. And we've had some discussion at these workshops on that too, so. And then we have done just some backpack spraying, individual plant treatments. We've got one contract with prickly pear, where the guy's actually just digging it out in areas, but he's retired, kind of hobby ranch, and it's, you know, that's what he chooses to do. It's pretty hard to do on a large scale, but it's an option. And we also have what we call weed control, which is not necessarily brush species, and that a lot of times you might do for an invasive species. And we do have that as a tool as well. Oh, and also, you know, just a plug, the Santa Cruz NRCD actually bought backpack sprayers. Is it just backpack or quad mounted?
They have a quad mounted sprayer now too.
Yeah, and they're actually gonna be renting that out super cheap for people. So that's something to think about, whether that might be worth an expense somewhere to have so people could spot treat on their area. And they're not charging much for rent, they just want more, money in case somebody breaks it or doesn't return it. And then they're gonna return it to people, but, you know, so that's something to think about going forward. Again, this is kind of afterwards killing off the smaller trees because they're too hard to get in and push, and it's starting to come back. So that's what they're doing on these one, and Elkhorn has done a lot of that. Charlie knows what he's doing there. And then that's just a photo after treatment. It's kind of hard. And then the fire that we've done, we don't actually like the match with NRCS. We'll help with planning for it. We do have a financial payment. Some of us have been through all the fire training, burn boss training, and can be out on a fire. Others are getting experience on it, but generally somebody else leads it, and in most cases we've talked about state fire doing the lead, but we might be out there doing fire weather or helping, we'd help with writing the plan, and then that plan needs to go through approval. But it is possible, and it is a payment we can make for it. By the acre, we pay on that. So, we basically have a lot of documents we go through to do any method. We can help you just technically and not pay financially, and then, you know, some of our rules don't apply if we're not doing the financial, but we're doing recommendations. But if it's financial, we have some rules, some documents we have to look at to make decisions on how we're gonna do that. So I wanted to look at those. Now I don't know if they're in this or,
They're on
Let's
the
see.
website.
if not, she loaded them on the computer. I don't know if she kept them
They're down
open
the
tomorrow.
bottom,
just gonna have you kind of arrow down through these a little bit, I'm not gonna read through the whole thing, but, so basically, one of the things that we use is, as you have that, I think you're calling it a decision to support or whatever, this one that you have in your packet, that you guys have started to work on, with all the methods and all that. This is one that we have as a reference to use as well. And I believe that this was developed out of New Mexico from what I recall, but we've been using it for a long time. So basically you can look at the species and the treatment method, we have a timing where it might be applicable, and the techniques. We don't necessarily, well, let's go on down to, let's look at the chemical. As you'll see, consult with a certified herbicide applicator. We do not put on our list exactly what chemicals you can use because they change. And you need a certified applicator, and then you have to follow those instructions, and you'll see in our planning that that's how we set it up. So you can look, if you keep going down, just kind of arrow down all the different species that we look at treating and the different methods. So catclaw might be in this area. And then there's a lot that you may or may not ever want to treat around here, but you could. And then things in chaparral, you can just go down to mesquite and just keep going quite a ways. But you can see we've got almost every species that we might target that's woody. So, you know, we have all sorts, so basically we look at all those different things that you could do. Basal oil, pushing, dozing, sawing, root plowing, and then everything of when it should be done. Now, there also may be conditions that you can't follow this timing because you may have an endangered species that you can't disturb an area, you can't be in an area with less equipment. So we kind of look at that case by case. But you can continue on down, and then we get into grubbing, prescribed burning, and then chemical. Again, that's what we say on it. We've got to see what's out there at the time. Things change through the years, and some things in Arizona are approved and may not be in another state. So that's where we look at that. So that's kind of our first decision control, or one of them that we use. And you can go to the next one. Sorry, I did it this way. I'm just not.
This one?
Yeah. So then we have a specific standard for brush management that we use. So if you come to us and say that you want to do brush management, I've kind of highlighted some of the main stuff so you can, so basically we were talking about that a minute ago. What's the purpose? Are we looking for a plant community consistent with the ecological site description? And I'll talk about that a little more. And getting a desired state, but we could also just be looking at protecting soils and controlling erosion, because you're getting a whole bunch of woodies in an area, all the herbaceous is gone and you're starting to get erosion, you want to get them out. You could be looking at enhancing fish and wildlife habitat for a specific species. Antelope comes to mind, we do a lot of that over near Sonoyta. We may want to just be managing fuels, improving forage, or maybe a pervasive plant species to maintain a steady state. So again, you may never be able to get back to that historical site, but you might want to get it to a steady state where it's not getting worse. So those are all the different methods. And then, you know, it's basically all lands except crop. And then you can go on down. There's quite a few things in here, but I wanted to highlight a few. And again, you can pull this up on, this was updated in September of 2017, and you can pull it off of our technical guides. And then I just wanted to highlight that we're looking at some of the rules that we have in our standard. So if we're going to treat it, we have to rest that pasture for a minimum of 2 spring and summer growing seasons. So that's a requirement by NRCS, because we want regrowth on that herbaceous vegetation once those plants are out of there, and not have cattle go run right in and hit the new green growth, take it out by the roots, and then we haven't done any good. So that's a requirement that we have. And again, if you cannot find a way to rest that pasture, If it's too big, you might look at splitting it before you do some brush treatments. You know, there's other options, find somewhere that you can put your cattle. But in general, as we know, our growing season here is July through October-ish. So that's when we need them out for 2 years, regardless of the type of brush treatment you do. So that's one of the rules that I wanted to point out. And, okay. So I've got a example of that, but so brush treatments on native rangelands, you can't remove more woody species than is on the ecological site description. So we've had this come up where somebody wants to treat brush in a bottom. Now we've had a waiver for that on a couple of treatments because it was right along the border, and I don't know if that will ever happen again. But if you've got a loamy bottom or sandy bottom, and we know that historically it had, I don't know, 20% of the production was mesquite, 30%, and you want to take it all out, we won't pay for that because we want it to be what it historically was. And as we know from all the photos and historical, it wasn't all over the uplands here through the whole valley. It was down right in those bottoms. Now, that doesn't mean you can't go in. If you've got 80% mesquite right now, you couldn't go in and treat some of it, but going in and trying to push it all out because of wildlife habitat. In this rule, you could do some hand treating, you could do some other things, you know, to treat some of it, but we're not gonna go in and clear a whole bottom. Just so you know, we wanna get back to what the ecological site should be. And there may be management reasons why you wanna clear that whole thing, but it doesn't meet our resource concerns within NRCS. Okay. I don't know if there's anything else. I think there's. Also, I highlighted this because you know we have Pima pineapple cactus in this whole valley, and we have it in a lot of areas within our work area. So basically, again, we have to coordinate on that. So we've had real good luck, I think, with Fish and Wildlife. Scott Richardson has worked with us quite a bit, especially on the fire stuff so far, where we were supposed to survey 100% of Pima pineapple, and instead he let us do some belt transects as long as we went back and monitored, looked at what the kill was and how it did, and then moving forward we'll see whether they let us continue. And we're talking about that with chemical too, where they're gonna let us probably go ahead and treat some areas with Pima pineapple and see what happens. He's not gonna let us do huge areas, but he's gonna let us test it and see what happens, and we're just gonna coordinate through that. So depending on what you've got in your area, that it's either the timing of treatment or the type of treatment may be affected by the species that you have. And again, since we have to comply with the Threatened and Endangered Species Act, we have to look at all that and make sure that they're not adversely affected, or if they are, we have to get tape from Fish and Wildlife and consult. So, okay. Yeah, I think there's one more we just talked about. See, I don't want to go through everything on this, but you certainly can go look at it yourself. Okay, and I'll talk about this a little more, but I just wanted to note that we also have to have at minimum goals and objectives, pre-treatment cover, post-treatment cover, maps, drawings, and a monitoring plan. So I'll talk about that back in the document, but we talked about monitoring. When you're doing a project with NRCS, and I can't speak for other field offices, but I can tell you this field office still does a lot of monitoring. Our range specialists do a lot, and until somebody tells me they can't anymore, they'll continue to do a lot. And if we're doing a brush treatment or a fire, we're gonna monitor before and after. So, and I'll talk a little bit about how we're gonna monitor. But it says right in here we will. So if somebody else isn't doing that, they're supposed to be. So if you're working somewhere else and they're saying, well, we can't monitor, you know, point out their standard that they're supposed to be monitoring. And it doesn't say that you have to do it, you know, we will do it with you. We're not gonna go out and monitor without the rancher there, I'll tell you that. We want the rancher there, we're not monitoring for ourselves. So, I think that's it on there. There's a whole bunch more, several pages long. and then all sorts of references. And then there's one more document, if you can go ahead and flip to that. Putting you to work. Okay, so once we've decided on a method, so that was the standard. Now this is basically a specification or job sheet that needs to be filled out. So I thought I'd put chemical up. We have one for chemical, we have it for mechanical, we have it for fire. And we have to put basically what is this prescription that we're gonna do. So, you know, just the basics, the date, where we're gonna do it and all that. And then basically, they have to understand they received a copy and any attachments, and that maintenance of the work is necessary for proper performance for the life of the practice. Our lifespan is 10 years. So we're not gonna come back and treat again with our payment for 10 years. So maintenance is pretty important. And as Charlie knows, it's probably a lot less work if you get in there and maintain a little bit each year. But I don't know, it's a lot of work for you each year, isn't it? Okay, and then you can go on down. So then we have, I talked about the purpose, we have to put what that purpose was and if there were any additional. And then we have to put anything about the site that we have, location, a map, the acres, what major land area it's in, what ecological site, the soils, what pasture name or number we gave it, elevation, average precip, what species we're targeting. We need to know the present plant community, again, the monitoring, the reference, what it should be, and what it's going to be, what it is after, what the plan is for afterwards. Are we trying to get 100% kill, or are we trying to get 80%? What are we looking for? And then then you can have secondary targets, and then kind of just a narrative of a detail of what you're gonna do. And then for chemical, we put what herbicide is gonna be planned, so you have to consult with your applicator or become a certified applicator yourself and use a product that works for it. And then we talk about what the rate's going to be, so that's all information you have to get to us. And the dates, and if there's any mitigation because of species or anything else where you can't go in and treat. And then we have to have the label of any of them, so that's a couple, and then the rate of spray, we attach the label. Treatment of standing dead, sometimes you wanna do chemical and then get that dead out of there if you're going to do that, or are you just gonna leave it? Are there associated practices? So again, deferring the pastures afterwards. If there's any fencing that might be required because you have to keep animals out, those type of things. And then we have to have a map of it. And then again, lifespan 10 years. And then monitoring is right in here as well. So that's kind of how we work through the planning process. But again, if you wanted to go on our website and use this for a plan of your own, you certainly could model your design after this practice. And then we go out and inspect it and look at what actually happened. It's kind of the same stuff. That's it. And then you can go back to the PowerPoint, please. Or wherever
It's
you
in
were.
Chrome. Yeah.
A little cheerful, colorful thing.
Or, yeah, sorry, it was in your story.
Oh.
Okay, then just the next slide.
Did I just go
You're going backwards.
forward to back?
That's all right. I'm not sure where we're at now. Okay, and then one more. Okay, and then our ecological site guides are about 18, 20 pages long. And they're based on topography, climate, plant community, parent material, all those. And it's a description of, you know, if we looked out to the next pasture here, is this a loamy upland? What kind of soils is it on? What's the parent material? What's the precip zone? And what are the plants that are historically there? Through the years of looking at different, that's all right. Through the years of looking at it, we've come up with a list of all the forbs, all the grasses, all the brush, and then trees. So if we were looking at a loamy upland site in this rainfall zone, I may be in the 16 to 20, 12 to 16 on this. This is what the trees should be historically. Alligator, one seed, white oak, emery oak. Mesquite isn't there. If you've got a bunch of mesquite, we're gonna help pay to remove that. So that's the reference that we look at for that. I just wanted to throw that up quick when I'm talking about the ecological sites. And again, where's the most up-to-date of those? Still on the U of A link site for ecological sites?
No, it's on our website.
On our website, okay. So you know, once we know the ecological, we can pull up the whole thing and look at it. We can get it. You went backwards. That's all right.
She does that all the time.
Yeah.
I don't know how I got this job, I'm not.
And I just pulled up from that standard and where it says a monitoring plan should be devised. So what we do a lot of frequency monitoring in this area where we use our little frame and we look at whether plants are in and out of the frame. So we do frequency, we do photo points, but usually when we do a brush job, we also do a 1/100th acre plot and we count the stems that are alive before the treatment and after and go back to that. But we also like to continue to set up a frequency because we want to see did we improve the other species. And counting stems isn't going to tell you that. It's not going to tell you the production of grasses and all of that. And we really feel like trying to get that basal cover too is a good idea as well. So it's kind of up to us to set up the monitoring, but it needs to have timing and frequency and then documents that compare the plant communities with the objectives. So go ahead. Go forward. Ahead. Okay. Yeah. So basically, this is, you can just read through that. I'm not going to read it to you, but basically that's what we're doing. And we try, if we can, to do a key area inside and outside, so we can compare the two. Sometimes we already have a key area on a ranch that's really near where we're going to do the treatment, so we don't have to set up a new one either in or out. So, go ahead. Is there something else on that slide? I hope so. Okay, so this is last year's prices. And I want you to know that you can go to our website probably, well, right now we don't have a farm bill. So, I mean, there isn't one, period. But once they pass it and we get our payment schedules, each year we update them and we usually get them on the website by December or January and then we start getting funding again. But this was last year, so this is just a snippet of the different practices and what we pay. You know, so we look at how the infestation is and we have specifics of what's considered small, light, medium, and heavy based on production. So it gives you an idea of what we would pay for mechanical, and then we have mechanical and chemical combined. We do large shrubs, small shrubs, hand tools, fire. There's all sorts of different payment schedules there, and they're all per acre. Yes, and we used to say we'd pay 75% of what it's gonna cost you or thereabouts. Now we just have a flat rate because we have 5 states, I think it is, Nevada, Utah, Arizona, Colorado, and New Mexico, that we get an average cost. So sometimes things in New Mexico are a lot cheaper than here, sometimes they're more expensive, so we can't guarantee we're gonna pay that, you know, like 75%. But if we had a price that was way, way off from what you're being charged, we can submit it each year to try to get that cost upped. But probably our chemical guy here can tell you they can go right into our website and see what we pay and figure out their prices based on that as well. And I'm not just saying chemical people do that. Well drillers do it. Everyone does it. Even if they were cheaper than what we were paying, their prices automatically went up.
Oh, I wouldn't go that far. There's a lot of competition out there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm talking about well drillers that
well
happen to
drillers.
us and
Oh,
stuff,
yeah.
yeah, and so, but yeah, so they can see it, but so can you, and you can figure out what it's gonna cost you and whether it's worth it for you to apply, because whatever the price gets set, that's what we have to pay. We no longer collect any billing and then pay you a percent. Go ahead.
What's the definition of small shrub versus, up above where you have large shrubs?
Basically anything, I'd say snakeweed, burrowweed, those ones are small. I don't know, do we have a height on that? I don't even know how it reads.
Like 4 foot.
Yeah,
Lower.
it's usually 4.5 feet we consider a tree, and shrubs. Yeah. Okay, move ahead. Again, there's, so, let me see, and then we've got the aerial applied, gets cheaper of course. And then we also have some re-sprouting species ones too. Then, there's another one here that's new for us, this split method event series, the second one down. We actually have started looking at, because there's a 10-year lifespan and there's some maintenance and you don't always get the kill you want, of actually splitting it into like 3 years, where you can treat it and you get a lower payment, and then you go back and retreat that doesn't get killed and resprouted. But it's less than what the main treatment would be. So there's an option to do that, and if you want more information on that, Emilio's our active state rangeman, you can ask him during the break. Okay, it's new to us, so. Yep.